It was my granddaughter who told me first. She was 9 years old, sitting on the back porch with her legs dangling off the edge, peeling a clementine into one long, unbroken spiral, the way I taught her when she was 4. I was watching the sun come down over the back pasture, the light hitting that strange honey color it does in late September in central Pennsylvania, and she said it without looking up. She said, "Grandpa, Aunt Lainey was kissing Mr. Drew in the barn yesterday." I didn't say anything for a minute. I just watched her thumb move through the peel. Then I said, "Are you sure about that, sweetheart?" She nodded. She wasn't upset. She wasn't excited. She was 9 and she was peeling a clementine, and she was telling me something the way she'd tell me a calf had been born. She didn't know what it meant. I'm grateful for that. I'm grateful she didn't know. My name is Otis Penhallow. I'm 68 years old. I've been a dairy farmer for 43 of those years, and a husband for 39. My wife passed in 2019, ovarian cancer, and after she died, I thought my running was about done. I thought I'd just wind out my days on this land my father bought in 1962, drink my coffee, look at my cows, and meet her again when the Lord saw fit. I didn't expect to meet anybody else. I sure didn't expect to remarry, but 2 years after my wife was buried, I met a woman named Corinne at a county fair down in Bedford, of all places. She was selling preserves at a folding table, strawberry rhubarb mostly. She was 51 years old, soft around the edges in a way I liked, widowed herself, and she had a laugh that came up from her belly like she'd just remembered something funny that happened to her in 1985. I asked her about her preserves. I bought 4 jars. I drove home thinking about her, and that scared me because I hadn't thought about a woman in 2.5 years and I felt like a traitor for doing it. I called her the next week. She drove up to see the farm a month after that. We were married 17 months later in the spring of 2023, in a small ceremony in the same Methodist church where I'd buried my first wife. Corinne wore lilac. My daughter Rhoda walked her down the aisle, which I thought was a beautiful thing for her to do, and which I will carry with me to the end of my days because of what came after. Now let me tell you about my daughter. Rhoda is 41. She's my only child. Her mother and I had a hard time having her. Lost 2 before her, and when she finally came, she came like a thunderclap 3 weeks early, 4 pounds and an ounce, fists curled, screaming. She's been screaming through this world ever since, in the best way. She's a litigator. She works for a firm in Harrisburg that handles agricultural law and estate disputes. She's tall like her mother was. She's tough like her grandfather was. She has a daughter of her own, my granddaughter Marisol, who I'll get back to. And a husband I'll get back to, too. Although I have to take some breaths before I can write his name down. His name is Drew Hatchett. Drew. The same Drew who was in my barn. He's 38. He's an engineer. He works for a firm that designs water treatment systems for small municipalities. He's been married to my daughter for 11 years. He calls me sir. He's never raised his voice at her in front of me. He brought her flowers on her birthday last year. White peonies, her mother's favorite. I thought he was a good man. I thought he was, at minimum, a decent man. And I am not given to thinking decent things about people without evidence. I've been wrong about people in my life, but I am not often wrong about men. Or I didn't think I was. I will tell you the truth, and the truth is this. When my 9-year-old granddaughter told me what she'd seen, my first thought was not anger. My first thought was that she must be confused, because here's what didn't add up. My granddaughter said, Lainey, and Lainey is not my wife. Lainey is my wife's younger sister. Let me back up. Corinne has one sister. Her name is Lainey. She's 46 years old, divorced, 2 grown kids who live in Phoenix. And she moved up here from Maryland in the summer of 2024 because she said she wanted to be closer to family. She rented a little place on Route 45, about 12 minutes from us. And she'd come over for Sunday dinner most weeks. And I liked her well enough. She had a sharper tongue than Corinne. She drank a little more than Corinne. She wore her hair in a way that I thought was a little young for her. But my first wife used to say I had opinions about hair. I had no business having, so I kept that to myself. Lainey had been at the farm the day before my granddaughter saw what she saw. Lainey came over a lot. She liked to sit in the kitchen with Corinne and drink wine in the afternoon. She liked to walk the property. She liked, apparently, to go into my barn with my son-in-law. I sat on the porch with my granddaughter for a long time after she told me. I let her finish her clementine. I asked her if she told anybody else, and she said no, because she thought it might be a secret, and she didn't know if it was a good secret or a bad secret, so she just told me. Then she asked me if I wanted half her clementine, and I said yes, and we ate it together, and I watched her run back into the house to find her grandmother, and I sat there until the sun was all the way down, and the bats came out over the silo. I did not go in the house that night with the intention of doing anything. I did not have a plan. I had a feeling like somebody had dropped a stone down my throat, and it had landed in the bottom of my gut and was just sitting there, cold. That night I lay in bed next to Corinne and I listened to her breathing. She fell asleep easy. She always did. I lay there until 2 in the morning, and at some point I made a decision, which was that I was not going to confront anybody until I knew exactly what I was looking at. I had been a fool once in my life before, and only once. And it had to do with a man I'd gone into business with in 1987 who walked off with $12,000 of mine. After that, I made myself a rule. The rule was that you never accuse a man without proof he can't squirm out of. You never tip your hand. You watch. You wait. You build your case. I was going to build my case. The next morning, I called my daughter from the truck. I drove down to the bottom of the property, and I sat in the cab with the engine running, and I called her. I said, "Rhoda, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me, even if the honest answer is a hard one." She said, "Daddy, what's wrong?" I said, "How are things between you and Drew?" There was a long silence on the line, long enough that I started counting the seconds. I got to 14. Then she said, "Why are you asking me that?" I said, "Because I asked you. How are things?" She said, "Daddy." She said it the way she used to say it when she was 12 and she'd done something she didn't want to tell me about. There's a particular weight to the way my daughter says my name when she's about to tell me something she's been holding on to. And in that moment, on that gravel road at the bottom of my property, with the heater running in the truck and the steam coming up off the creek across the way, I knew that she knew. I knew that she had been knowing. I said, "Sweetheart, you need to drive up here today by yourself." She said, "I can be there by 3. She was there by 2:30. We sat in my truck out by the equipment shed because I didn't want Corinne to see us talking, and my daughter told me. She told me everything. She had known for 9 months. 9 months, and she hadn't said a word to me because she was building her own case. Let me explain something about my daughter. When she was 11 years old, her mother and I caught her keeping a notebook. It was a stenopad, the green kind, and she'd been writing down every single time her teacher, a man named Mr. Bracco, had made a comment about a girl in her class who was overweight. She had dates. She had what he said. She had what he said. She had who else heard him say it. She'd been keeping that notebook for 4 months. And when she had what she felt was enough, she walked it into the principal's office and laid it on his desk. Mr. Bracco was let go before Thanksgiving. My daughter does not raise her voice. My daughter builds files. Drew had been having an affair with Lainey for at least 14 months, possibly longer. My daughter had become suspicious in January when she noticed Drew's phone face down on the kitchen counter at all times, something he'd never done before. She'd noticed him taking long showers when he came home from work. She'd noticed that the gas in his car was lower than it should have been based on his commute. She is the kind of woman who notices these things. I raised her that way, and her mother raised her that way, and the world she works in sharpened it. But here is the part that put the stone back in my stomach. Drew wasn't just sleeping with Lainey. Drew and Lainey were working on something. My daughter had found, in March, an email account on Drew's laptop he didn't know she had access to. She'd had access to it for 2 years. He'd left himself logged in once on her iPad, and she'd written down the password. She'd never used it. Until March, when she did. What she found in that email account was correspondence between Drew and Lainey dating back to before Corinne and I were even married. Lainey had targeted me. That's what my daughter said, sitting in the cab of my truck with her hands flat on her knees, looking out at the equipment shed where I keep my old Case tractor. She said, "Daddy, your sister-in-law targeted you. She came up here on purpose. She brought my husband into it on purpose. She has been planning this for 3 years." I said, "Planning what?" My daughter said, "The land. The land. My farm sits on 460 acres. Most of it is pasture and the back 90 is timber, mostly hardwoods, a lot of it old growth. In 2018, a year before my first wife passed, a man from a development company in New Jersey came to my door and offered me $1.7 million for the back 90. He wanted to put up a subdivision of vacation homes for people coming up from Philadelphia and Baltimore. I said no. I said no in language that was, let's say, agricultural. He left a card. I burned the card. But he came back twice more, in 2020 and 2022 with bigger numbers. The last time, 2.4 million. I told nobody about those offers except my first wife, and after she passed, my daughter. I told my daughter because I told my daughter everything that had a number attached to it. She is, after all, going to inherit everything I own. Or she was supposed to. Corinne and I had a prenup. Or so I thought. Lainey, it turned out, had introduced Corinne to a lawyer in Maryland who'd helped Corinne with her late husband's estate. That same lawyer had drawn up our prenup. My daughter had reviewed the prenup at the time, and she'd said it looked fine. It hadn't been fine. There was a clause in it, buried in the asset division section, that my daughter had missed. My daughter does not miss things. But she'd been 6 months pregnant with my granddaughter's little brother at the time, and she'd been reading it on her phone, and she'd missed it. The clause said that any real property that I, the husband, encumbered with a commercial development contract during the term of the marriage would, upon my death, be subject to a 49% community interest claim by my surviving spouse, regardless of testamentary instruction. In plain English, if I signed a deal to sell or develop my back 90 and then I died, Corinne would get 49% of the proceeds even if my will gave everything to my daughter. In Pennsylvania, community property law, which doesn't normally apply, had been contractually invoked in our prenup by that same lawyer. My daughter had figured this out in May. She'd had it reviewed by 2 attorneys at her firm. Both confirmed it. Both said it would be defensible in court. Both said the only way to invalidate it would be to prove fraud in the inducement, which is very, very hard to do. Unless, of course, you had emails. Which my daughter did. Lainey had been talking to Drew about this since 2022. The plan in its most cynical and naked form was this. Lainey would introduce her sister to a wealthy old widower with a piece of valuable land. Corinne would marry him. Lainey would set up the prenup through her Maryland attorney. Lainey would then, working with Drew, who's the engineer, identify which parcel was the most developable and pressure me, through Corinne, to sell or develop it. If I refused, which Lainey had calculated I would, they would wait. Corinne was 17 years younger than me. Statistically, she would outlive me by a good while. When I died, Corinne would inherit 49% of any developed land, plus her dower interest, plus whatever she could get in probate court. Drew, who would by then have divorced my daughter and married Lainey, would handle the development. Lainey would get her cut from her sister. It was, my daughter said, the cleanest piece of long-form fraud she'd ever seen executed by people without law degrees. I sat in the truck and I looked at my hands. I was 68 years old. I had buried a wife I loved. I had built this farm with my father and held it through 3 recessions and the dairy crisis of the late 90s and the year my barn burned down in 2007. I had raised a daughter who had become the kind of woman who finds these things out, and I had married a woman who, it turned out, had been put in front of me at a county fair like a piece of cheese in a trap. I am not a man given to crying. I cried in the truck. My daughter held my hand. She didn't say anything. She just held my hand until I was done. Then she said, "Daddy, I have a plan. But I need you to do exactly what I say." I said, "Tell me." Here's what she told me. The plan was to do nothing. Nothing different. Nothing for 6 weeks. I was to go back into that house and kiss my wife goodnight and have Sunday dinner with her sister. And I was to act like a man whose life was exactly what he thought it was. Because we needed 3 things. First, we needed Drew on tape, not just emails. Audio. My daughter would handle that. She had ways. She was a litigator. I didn't ask. Second, we needed Lainey to commit to the plan in writing. Right now, the emails were old. They could be argued away. They needed something fresh, something dated. Third, and this was the part that took my breath, we needed Drew to leave my daughter. We needed him to file first. Because the second he filed, my daughter would file a counterclaim, and the counterclaim would include the emails and the audio and the evidence of conspiracy to commit fraud against me. Drew would lose everything in the divorce. He would also, depending on the prosecutor, possibly be facing criminal charges. I said, "How do we get him to file first?" My daughter said, "We make him think we know about him and Lainey, but not the rest. He needs to think we caught him cheating. He needs to think the smart move is to cut and run before I take his pension." I said, "How do we do that?" My daughter said, "Marisol is going to tell her mother what she saw." I said, "Absolutely not. I am not putting my granddaughter in the middle of this." My daughter said, "Daddy, she's already in the middle of this. He is her father. He's been lying to her face for 14 months. She told you because she trusted you to do something about it. The kindest thing we can do for her is to make sure she sees us do something about it." I sat with that for a long time. Then I said, "All right." So we did nothing. For 6 weeks, I sat at my own kitchen table, and I ate my wife's pot roast, and I told her stories about the Heifers, and I held her hand at church, and I watched her sister come into my house and pour herself a glass of my wine and laugh. That laugh I used to find sharp, and now found vile. I let her hug me. I let her sister kiss my cheek. I let my son-in-law shake my hand at Sunday dinner the second week of October, and I said, "Drew, good to see you." And I meant none of it. And he didn't know I meant none of it. And I'm not proud of how good I was at it. My granddaughter told her mother what she'd seen. She did it on a Saturday morning in the kitchen while my daughter was making pancakes. She just said it, the same way she'd told me. My daughter played her part. She got very quiet. She put down the spatula. She asked my granddaughter twice if she was sure. Then she sat down on a kitchen chair and she cried, real tears, because my daughter, when she needs to, can cry on cue. And she always could, even at 4 years old when she wanted a second cookie. Drew came home that afternoon. My daughter confronted him. She did it exactly the way we'd planned. She said she knew about Lainey. She said she'd known for 3 weeks. She said she wanted a divorce, and she wanted it clean, and she wanted it fast, and if he fought her, she would burn his career to the ground. Drew, who is not as smart as he thinks he is, did the smart-looking thing. He admitted it. He cried. He said it had been going on for 6 months, which was a lie by 8 months. He said he'd ended it, which was a lie by 8 months. He said he'd ended it, which was a lie because he hadn't. He said he'd file the papers Monday morning to keep it civil. He filed the papers Monday morning. My daughter's counterclaim was already drafted. It had been drafted for 3 weeks. It was filed Tuesday afternoon. It included the emails. It included 2 audio recordings my daughter had obtained through means I was not told about and did not ask about. It included a forensic accounting of 14 separate financial transactions between Drew and Lainey going back to 2023. It included a copy of my prenuptial agreement with the relevant clause highlighted in yellow, attached to an affidavit from a senior partner at my daughter's firm explaining what it meant. And it included a separate civil action, filed by me, against my wife and her sister, for conspiracy to commit fraud, and for rescission of the prenuptial agreement on grounds of fraud in the inducement. I had Corinne served at the kitchen table. I will tell you about that because it is the part I will remember when I am dying. I had asked Corinne the night before to host a small dinner, just family, Her, me, Lainey, Rhoda, my granddaughter, and her little brother. I said I had something I wanted to announce. Corinne thought I was going to announce that I was finally going to take the development offer. I had hinted gently over the previous 2 weeks that I was reconsidering. I had let her see me reading the old paperwork. I had let her see me look thoughtful. She had told Lainey. I knew she told Lainey because Drew had texted Lainey about it, and my daughter had that text, so they came to dinner. They were practically vibrating. Lainey wore a blouse I'd never seen before. Corinne had made my favorite, beef and barley soup with the good bread from the bakery in Lewisburg. She had set the table with her mother's china, which she only did on Christmas. They were celebrating. I let them eat. Halfway through the meal, the doorbell rang. Corinne got up to answer it. She came back into the dining room with a confused look on her face and an envelope in her hand. She said, "Otis, there's a man at the door who says I have to sign for this." I said, "Sign for it, sweetheart." She did. She brought the envelope back to the table. She opened it. She read the first page. She read it again. Her face went the color of skim milk. Lainey said, "Corinne, what is it?" I said, "It's a lawsuit, Lainey, from me, against the both of you." The fork came out of Lainey's hand. "I want to be honest with you. I had imagined this moment for 6 weeks, and in my imagination I made a speech. I had practiced the speech. I had a part about my first wife in it. I had a part about my father in it. I had a part where I quoted scripture. I'm not even particularly religious, but I had a Proverbs verse queued up. I didn't give the speech. What I did was, I looked at my wife of 2.5 years, the woman I had loved or thought I had loved, and I said very quietly, "I want you out of my house by tomorrow morning. I have packed your things. They are in the front hall. You will not be permitted back on this property. The prenup is being challenged in court. You will not get 1 acre of my land. You will not get $1 of my money. You came into this house with a plan to bury me and take it, and you brought your sister and my daughter's husband in on it. And I knew for 6 weeks. I let you sit at my table tonight because I wanted you to feel safe one more time before you understood that you never were." Lainey stood up. Lainey said, "You can't prove a goddamn thing." I said, "Lainey, your emails to Drew from October 7th, October 14th, October 22nd, the Zelle transfers to your daughter that came from Drew's business account. The audio of you and Drew in the parking lot of the Sheets outside of Selinsgrove. My daughter has all of it. The senior partner at her firm has all of it. The district attorney in Center County is going to have all of it Monday morning. You're going to prison, Lainey. Both of you might be." Corinne sat down. She just sat down. Her legs went out from under her. She sat down hard in her chair, and she looked at me and she said the only thing she said to me that night. She said, "Otis, I didn't know about the development plan. I swear to God, I didn't know. And here's what I will tell you about that." I think she was telling the truth. I think Lainey had not told her sister the whole picture. I think Corinne had married me because Lainey put me in front of her and told her I was a good man with money. And I think Corinne had grown to feel something for me, in her way. And I think the affair between Drew and Lainey was something Corinne did not know about and would not have approved of. I think my wife was a foolish woman who let her sister run her life and not a calculating one. But here is what I will also tell you. It does not matter, because when you marry a man and you let yourself be the instrument by which he is robbed, the question of how much you knew is a question for your own conscience and your own God. It is not a question I am required to answer for you. I have a daughter to protect. I have a granddaughter who told me what she saw in the barn. I have a farm my father bought in 1962 with money he made working 2 jobs. I told Corinne I was sorry that her sister had used her. I told her she could keep the car. I told her the rest she would have to take up with my lawyer. She left that night. She didn't wait until morning. She drove away at 11:15 and I watched her taillights go down the lane and around the bend by the Henderson silo, and then they were gone. Lainey was arrested the following Thursday on charges of conspiracy to commit fraud and a couple of other things I don't remember the names of. Drew was arrested the same day. The prenup was rescinded in February. My daughter's divorce went through in April. She took the house, the cars, the pension, and full custody. Drew did not contest it. He could not afford to. My granddaughter is 11 now. She still comes out to the farm. She still peels her clementines in one long spiral. She has not asked me about that day. I don't know if she will ever ask. If she does, I will tell her the truth, which is that she saw something, and she trusted me with it, and I made sure it mattered. My daughter and I have Sunday dinner together every week. Sometimes she brings the kids. Sometimes she comes alone. Last Sunday, she brought a man with her, a quiet man named Bo, who teaches at the community college. And I shook his hand that I looked him in the eye and I think he's all right. I think he might be all right. I'm going to watch a while before I decide. I sold the back 90 this past June, not to the developer, to the state land trust. They paid me less than half of what the developer had offered. They are turning it into a public hardwood preserve. There will be a small plaque at the trailhead with my first wife's name on it. I picked the spot where the plaque will go myself. It's by a creek where she and I used to walk our dog when we were first married, before we had Rhoda, before we had anything but each other. And a mortgage and a young man's idea that the future was going to be long. I am 68 years old. I have been a fool exactly twice in my life. I do not intend to be a fool a third time. But I'll tell you this. Most days now, when I come up the porch steps in the evening and I see my daughter's car in the drive and I hear my granddaughter laughing through the kitchen window, I don't feel like a fool. I feel like a man who got lucky. I feel like a man whose daughter saw what was coming and stood in front of it. I feel like a man who was loved enough by the people who actually loved him to be saved. I wasn't the mark. Not in the end. I was the father. That, it turns out, was enough. I've been sitting with this story for almost 2 years now, and the thing I keep coming back to isn't the betrayal. It isn't Corinne. It isn't Lainey. It isn't Drew. The thing I keep coming back to is my granddaughter Marisol on the back porch with her clementine, telling me the truth because she trusted me to do something with it. That's the part that wakes me up at 4 in the morning sometimes, not the rage. The trust, because here is what I have learned, sitting on this porch at 68 years old. People show you who they are if you give them time and you watch with your eyes open. Lainey showed me. She showed me in 100 small ways before my granddaughter ever opened her mouth, and I missed every one of them, because I wanted to be a man who had a second chance more than I wanted to be a man who saw clearly. That's on me. That's the part I have to own. Loneliness will rewrite the evidence for you if you let it. What saved me wasn't strength. It was my daughter. It was Rhoda, who was raised right by her mother, who became the kind of woman who keeps records, who reads the fine print, who does not raise her voice and does not miss her shot. And it was a 9-year-old child who didn't know what she was seeing, but knew her grandfather was someone you tell the truth to. I did not save myself. I was saved. And I think any man who tells you he made it through a hard season on his own is lying to you or doesn't remember it right. The other thing I want to say is this. Patience is not the same as weakness. Sitting at that table for 6 weeks while my wife's sister drank my wine and laughed in my kitchen was the hardest thing I have ever done. Harder than burying my first wife. Harder than the year the barn burned, because every cell in my body wanted to throw them out that first night. But my daughter was right. You don't accuse a man without proof he can't squirm out of. You don't tip your hand. You build your case, and when you have it, you set the table, and you let them seat themselves. I'm not going to tell you that what happened to me was a blessing in disguise. It wasn't. It was a wound. I lost a woman I'd grown to love, even if she was a fool. And I lost a son-in-law I'd believed in. And I lost 2 years of trust I will never quite get back. But I will tell you that on the other side of it, I am closer to my daughter than I have ever been. I am a better grandfather. I am slower to believe a smile and quicker to believe a child. I sold the back 90 to people who will keep it whole. My first wife's name is on a plaque by the creek. That is what I have. That is enough.